Amara froze in her room, listening to the sounds coming from the luxurious mansion. Her heart was racing with excitement. Today will be the day, she thought, clenching her fists. Suddenly, the voice of Zena, Anissa, and Cato's daughter rang out. "Where are you, Amara? Did you lock yourself in again?" Zena burst into her personal space. "How many times have I told you not to lock yourself in?" Amara gritted her teeth. She'd been mute since birth, and her silence was something to be mocked. "No one can hear you," Zena hissed when another sneaky trick succeeded. "You're worthless," she taunted, throwing dirty rags in Amara's face. It seemed as if the whole world was blind and deaf to what was going on in their luxurious mansion. Even the teachers at school, seeing her gloomy look and clenched fists, preferred not to interfere. Amara seemed strange to them. Mute, withdrawn, always in the shadows. Mute became her defense, but also her curse. Every time someone laughed at her, Amara shrank back because she couldn't say what she thought. "I know you're in there," Zena continued, kicking loudly at the door. "Open up, you dumb klutz. All you do is hide." Zena's every word sounded like a blow. Amara knew she was an adopted daughter, a guest in this house, as her adoptive mother Anissa liked to say. Anissa and Cato were known in the neighborhood as successful, respected businessmen, but their impeccable image hid dark sides. Amara was 16 years old when she realized she couldn't take it anymore. Life in her foster parents' home had been hell from the first day she began to realize herself. Amara was a little girl when she was taken into foster care, but there was no warmth or care in that home. Her childhood had become a living nightmare. Every night when Amara was getting ready for bed, her foster mother would find any excuse to punish her. One day, for accidentally spilling water, the woman grabbed her by the hair and dragged her across the room, whispering in her ear, "You're as useless as your mom who abandoned you." Amara endured in silence, afraid to say a word because she knew it would only get worse. The foster father was silent and cruel. There was never an ounce of sympathy in his eyes. He would leave Amara locked in a small, dark pantry for a whole day without food, with only a bowl of water. When she was let out of there, her body would shake with hunger and fear. "You will sit here until you learn to be a good and obedient girl," he would say as he slammed the door shut, behind which there was no light, only darkness and cold. In moments like this, Amara began to gasp with loneliness, feeling the world shrink like a tight collar. But the worst tortures weren't physical. They made her question her own reality. "You're not normal, Amara," her mother repeated over and over. "All the problems in this house are because of you. You don't deserve love, and no one will ever love you." These words echoed in the little girl's head. Every time she tried to defend herself or simply express emotion, she was told that her feelings didn't matter. "You're not human. You're a mistake," her father said with a smile, watching her reaction as if it were something funny. These scenes were repeated year after year. Amara grew up in a world where her existence was considered a mistake, where her every move was harshly judged. But despite all the hardships and difficulties, Amara was a special, unusual child who had her own big secret. As the house fell silent at night, Amara opened her laptop, which she'd bought with the money she'd saved from occasional part-time jobs. This laptop became her portal to a world where she was not a mute orphan, but a talented hacker under the alias Silent Eye. Sophisticated courses in programming, cryptography, and technology, she learned everything she could, delving into the dark corners of the web to find her way to freedom. Every night, Amara delved into her secret life, becoming a master in the world of technology. She learned not only the basics of programming, but also complex algorithms, hacked into security systems, and even created her own hacking defenses. The night world, lit only by the light of the screen, became her sanctuary, but also her battleground. And every day she went out into the world, where her wounded soul met with ridicule and scorn. Anissa and Keto never missed an opportunity to humiliate her, and Xena always found ways to reinforce her superiority. An air of resentment and arrogance permeated the entire house. Amara felt like a ghost wandering the dark corridors, disenfranchised. One ordinary evening, Amara came across a file that made her heart beat faster. It belonged to Anissa, and she instinctively felt it was important. She began to study it, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Line by line, the gruesome truth was revealed. It was a scheme to launder money through fake charities. Huge sums intended to help orphans were transferred to offshore accounts, settling in Anissa and Kato's pockets. They're fooling everyone, Amara thought, shocked by her find. She realized that she had stumbled upon something grand. This was an opportunity to not just end the hell she was living in, but to stop crime. She sat in the dark room, staring at the glowing screen, her thoughts flitting from fear to determination. If Anissa and Keto found out that someone had tampered with their schemes, her life would be in jeopardy. But it was too late to back down. Amara knew she had to proceed with caution. She had to stay in the shadows, avoiding suspicion. Every step had to be thought out. A strategy was already brewing in her mind. Study every document, every transaction, gather evidence. At night, she sank deeper and deeper into her research. Anissa and Kato weren't just crooks. They were part of a network of powerful businessmen and officials willing to turn a blind eye to their crimes. But soon, Xena began to suspect something. She noticed that Amara was locking herself in her room with her laptop more and more often. One day, unable to stand it, she suddenly went into Amara's room and leaned over to the screen, trying to see what was going on. "What are you hiding there?" she asked insistently, peering over her shoulder. "Or did you think you were going to be smarter than the rest of us, you dumb clod?" Amara was overcome with fear. She quickly closed the document window and tried to appear nonchalant, but her heart was pounding with worry that Xena might suspect her true intentions. Xena grudgingly hummed and took a step back, but her gaze became even more wary. Amara knew that secrets couldn't stay hidden forever. Now she had to proceed even more cautiously. This night, with thoughts of freedom and revenge, she had made a decision. She would be ready. Now or never. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, her face illuminated by the faint light of the monitor. She could hear the sounds of the television and Zena's laughter echoing in the neighboring rooms. Anissa and Cato were resting after another charity dinner, an event where they had once again shown themselves to be caring and generous philanthropists. For this, they were smiled at by reporters, bowed to by officials, and the whole neighborhood continued to see them as role models. But Amara knew the truth. In front of her was not just a screen, it was her path to freedom, her weapon with which she could destroy her tormentors. Over the past few weeks, her computer had become a battlefield, where every line of code and every key played an important part in her plan. Amara had already hacked into several secure files, obtained bank account information, and monitored Anissa's email. But there was one last, riskiest step to take. She had to get to the very network of corrupt officials connected to her guardians and find something that would give them a lethal blow. She sighed and began to enter the next command. The light rustle of the keys was almost soothing, rhythmic and familiar. But behind that calmness lurked tension. Amara knew that her actions could have irreversible consequences. A mistake in the code or insufficiently strong encryption could reveal her tracks. That would be a disaster. Cato and Anissa were far from harmless people. If they found out who had cracked their schemes, she would become a target not only for them, but also for those with whom they conducted their shady dealings. The virtual world was a safe place for Amara. No one online knew her real name. No one knew that behind the nickname Silent Eye lurked a mute teenage girl. Here she was anything but a hacker, an observer, an expert, respected for her accuracy and skill. But in the real world, things were different. One wrong move, and her life could be over. Amara began to infiltrate the system of one of the shell companies she had already figured out was a money laundering nexus. It wasn't an easy task. She was facing one of the most secure corporate networks with professionals behind it. But she knew how to proceed. Patiently, cautiously, like a hunter waiting for the victim to make the wrong move. Amara entered the command to bypass the defense system. Her heart beat faster, but her movements remained precise. Her fingers glided easily across the keyboard. The program began browsing through files, moving from one folder to another. It hacked into access to the company's servers and found transaction reports. But that wasn't enough. Amara was looking for something more, something that wouldn't just expose the scheme, but make it collapse. And then, finally, she found it. The documents, encrypted with several layers of protection, contained the names of powerful people, officials, businessmen, and even judges who had received bribes through these funds. Amara stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of fear and satisfaction boil up inside her. This was more than she could have imagined. She had found evidence that could bring down not only her foster parents, but an entire network of powerful people. But to make sure her work would remain undetected until the very end, Amara decided to use a technique known only to experienced hackers: phantom chains. It was a kind of digital masquerade. When you tried to follow her actions, the traces led to false points, as if she were working from different parts of the world. She backed herself up by creating a few traps for those who might try to detect her. If someone started digging deeper, the code would work like a slow-motion virus, wiping out all traces of her activity. Amara didn't have to worry. She was like a shadow, disappearing before she could be spotted. At this stage, everything had to go perfectly. Mistakes were unacceptable. Amara began to work on preparing a data package to give to the journalists. It was dangerous, but she knew that no one else would be able to get the truth to the public so effectively. All she had to do was choose the right time and place to send the information. She decided to act through one of the old hacker communities she'd had access to since her teenage years. In this community, no one asked questions. People here respected those who knew how to be discreet. However, just as she set about completing the operation, Amara noticed something strange on her screen. A small alarm she had set in case someone tried to hack into her. Someone had started tracking her. It was unthinkable. Her defenses were impenetrable. No one could know where she was. Amara quickly began checking the system. The hack wasn't coming from her foster parents or their partners. It was something more dangerous. Professionals had infiltrated the system. Hackers. And they weren't local gangs she knew. Someone had hired them to find Silent Eye. Amara quickly severed the connection, but it was too late. Someone had already realized that the real person was hiding behind her nickname. Now, she didn't just have a short amount of time. She could be the target of these men. Her heart raced, but her hands remained steady. Amara realized she couldn't allow herself to panic. Her mind was too important in this battle. She quickly began to develop an escape plan that she had prepared in case of an emergency. All of her personal information regarding the network was uploaded to remote servers that she could destroy with a single command. These were her backup moves, and she decided to use them. The entire plan, from leaking the data to securely deleting the evidence of her interference, had been calculated down to the second. Now there was only one thing left to do: follow through before she was caught. The new day began like a normal day. The bright sun streamed through the heavy curtains, casting a golden light on Amara's room. The usual sounds were heard downstairs: the television, the muffled conversations of Anissa and Kato, the creaking of chairs in the kitchen. Zena had already managed to cast a scornful glance in Amara's direction as soon as she left her room. There was nothing to portend trouble. For everyone in the house, it was just another day filled with hypocritical smiles and contrived nobility, but not for Amara. Her heart was pounding frantically in her chest, and she could barely keep her emotions under control. Last night had been a feverish activity. She had sent all the data she had collected to the journalists. Everything was on the line. The hackers were already on her trail, but she'd managed to dump all the evidence into safe hands. It wasn't her battle now. The world had to know the truth, and soon that truth would fall on her foster parents. She looked out the window and saw a black car with tinted windows pull up to the house. It was followed by another car, a police car with flashing lights. Amara knew that in a few minutes, life in this house would change forever. Anissa, dressed in an expensive silk dress, was clearly getting ready for another charity event when there was a loud knock on the door. Cato, dressed in gold chains and a diamond watch, grinned as he looked at his wife. "Apparently someone came early," he muttered, not realizing that this was no ordinary visit. Anissa headed for the door, radiating confidence. She was the model of a socialite, always holding her head high, always knowing how to impress. But as soon as the door opened, her face changed. On the threshold stood not her subordinates, not her servants or business partners, but two uniformed policemen, followed by several other men in civilian clothes. One of them held an identification card. "Mrs. Anissa, Mr. Cato," one of the policemen began. "You are being held on suspicion of money laundering, fraud, and misuse of public funds." Anissa took a step back, her eyes widening with fear. Cato, who had just smiled and whistled carefree, froze in place. Confusion flashed in his eyes. Everything they had carefully hidden for years had come out. "This is some kind of mistake," Anissa shouted sharply, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. "Are you crazy?" But words didn't matter anymore. The cops came inside, presenting a search warrant. Cato tried to shout something, but his voice was silenced when his hands were behind his back and the handcuffs clicked on his wrists. There was fear in his gaze and the realization that their game was over. Zena, who was sitting on the sofa, watched in horror. She jumped to her feet and ran to her mother, trying to find an explanation, but she only shouted, "It's impossible. It's all a conspiracy. Someone has set us up." One of the journalists standing at the gate with a camera shouted out, "Mr. Cato, Mrs. Anissa, what do you say about the fact that all your funds were fictitious? How will you explain the millions that disappeared from your accounts? What do you say about the allegations? Is it true that your charitable foundations were used for money laundering?" Cato froze. Anissa, always confident in her integrity, was confused. The words were gone, and now her trademark mask of calm had crumbled. Amara watched the scene from the window of her room. Her heart was beating as fast as it had during all those nights she'd been hacking into systems. She knew that today was the point of no return. The outside of the house looked as luxurious as ever, but inside it had crumbled. Secrets had been exposed, and the people who had always seemed omnipotent now couldn't escape justice. As the police officers led Anissa and Cato to the cars, Amara felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. No more ridicule, no more fear. The world would finally know who they really were, and she, the mute orphan, would make her loudest and most decisive move yet. But inside her, there was no room for triumph. Instead, there was the realization that her future was now in her hands. The freedom she craved had come. But with it also came uncertainty. Her life was no longer in the hands of others, and now Amara had to figure out how to live in a world where she no longer had to hide behind a screen. She looked at her laptop again, the only tool that had helped her reach this moment. And for the first time in years, Amara smiled. May your life be full of joy and limitless possibilities. Thanks for watching. Be sure to share your opinion and don't forget to write a comment. Subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.